Zero Calorie Marketing is a podcast created for marketers by marketers. In this podcast, we cover everything from marketing, philosophy, life, and whatever else that comes in between. We ask our guests about their current marketing struggles, how they overcame their biggest hurdles in their career, as well as tips and tricks listeners may be able to take away. Without a further ado, let's get to it. So, I'm joined today by none other than Natasha Lytton, the head of brand, marketing, and portfolio support for Seedcamp. For those of you who don't know what Seedcamp is, they are a seed fund that invests in early, world-class founders attacking global markets and solving real problems using tech. The Seedcamp family includes TransferWise, now called Wise. You see what they did there. Revolut, Hopin, which has been a major success. UiPath. I actually don't know what UiPath is, so we can find out a bit more about that. Pleo. Funny enough, Pleo, the head of the person from Pleo is going to be in another podcast that we're doing. Is it Pleo or Pleo? We can ask this again. Pleo. Good.
Is it the head of brand? Is it Luke you're speaking to?
Yeah, Luke Richardson.
Very cool.
In our podcast.
Nice. I'll tell him I got there first.
Yes, you beat him to it. And we've got a funny story about Luke, actually.
Okay.
The other thing, so UiPath, Pleo, got that out of the way again. And including this very platform that we're speaking on. Okay. I don't care if I lose decorum. I am going to ask Natasha for a discount after this call is over because I literally just paid the invoice for StreamYard, which is owned by Hopin, which is a trillion-dollar company, so they can afford it.
Not quite trillion.
Not yet.
The rate they're going, it might not be long.
It might not be long. Give it a couple of weeks. Way things are going. Natasha's been with Seedcamp since 2016, and she's held before that, she's held a number of marketing positions, senior marketing positions, I should say, with a number of tech and also non-tech companies as well, because I was looking through your LinkedIn and discovered that you'd also worked in PR, which is obviously very, very different to what you're doing now, I guess, and which I'm hoping to talk to you about. I am super keen to speak to her about the key lessons that she's learned along her journey, and also gain real practical tips that we can all walk away with. And if she is in the mood or if she's up for it, maybe she'll give us a tune or two. No, you didn't miss her. As well as being a master marketeer, she has also recently released a single called Patterns, link to which will be on whatever platform you're listening to, and we will be promoting it as well. We're not stuffing fivers into bow ties, which we will hopefully hear about. She can be found chilling by the beach, probably with a gin in hand, and reading, writing, clubhousing about marketing. That is efficiency for you folks. For the mere mortals like us, we are 1/10 of how Natasha probably organizes her life. And, it's this kind of elite world that she obviously lives in, which we hope to find out more about. Natasha, thank you for being on our show. How exactly are you? Tell us the truth.
How exactly am I?
Yeah,
I put red lipstick on for the first time in 4 months because I'm going out for dinner tonight. I got my nails done yesterday. So I'm very happy to be a basic girl right now and just say I'm quite excited to feel and look a bit more like a human. So I used to bite the shit out of my nails until about the age of 30. I had so many people try and stage interventions, and like guy friends who were like, I will go with you for a manicure, but you have got to sort out your hands. They are absolutely disgusting. And so I made like a big concerted effort, finally stopped biting my nails. But then the trick to do it is I have to go and get a manicure, and I have to get the brightest, most garish color so that like they look cool and they're noticeable and I don't want to fuck with them. And then lockdown has screwed me. So yeah, that was a high priority yesterday. So do you know what? I'm feeling good. It's been a year of many highs and lows. I've definitely had some amazing experiences, work, as much as it's been tough and, miss kind of the huge amount of human interaction that we would traditionally get. And, all of these new founders that we've invested in that I've actually not got to meet. And, normally we work out of a space and we have a big area of co-working. So loads of our founders and, including Johnny, who founded Hopin, like he was in the office with us for the first 9 months of Hopin's existence. And, the closeness and just how much you see because you're interfacing with those founders every day versus in this last year of remote has, is definitely something we've all missed. But, dang, are we efficient, like remote working from home?
I mean, you know what? The meme going around which said the biggest innovator for corporate companies has been not a CMO who's, come in and actually change directions of the company, or a digital director, or some sort of a strategy led by the big four strategy companies. It's literally COVID. We couldn't literally leave the house. So that has been the biggest innovator.
But I mean, innovator or just like making everyone work themselves to the bone, right? Like positives and minuses. But well, people make shit happen when the world goes crazy, basically.
This is people make shit happen. That's a quote that we'll take away. And that's the kind of thing that someone who's been to Oxford, say a modern linguistics, French and Spanish would kind of observe.
Actually, I put that one in my dissertation. But in
dissertation makes it happen. Firstly, Natasha, you on the camera, it appears your nails are like the Lamborghini orange. Is that like coordinated with one of the several Lamborghinis that you actually have in your driveway? And it just so happens that's the car that you're going to go out and step into dinner with today. Is that what the vibe I'm getting here?
Do I look like someone who drives an orange Lamborghini?
I apologize. I
drive a bicycle.
Someone drives for you. Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Guys, we're getting a glimpse into how the 1% of the world lives. So,
don't tell me with that brush.
I'm joking. Look, Natasha, I actually have, the thing is, I was a Seedcamp alumni from a company called POC Studios, or they're called POC Commerce now. And I was like, I think employee number 5 for them back in the days. And actually, after leaving POC, I set up my company, Interesting Content. So
very cool.
And, this is a few years before your time at Seedcamp. So we did get lots and lots of learnings from the Seedcamp family, as it were. We got to connect with lots of alumni and also share best practice, and we got some time with the founders themselves. So that was really inspirational.
Awesome.
I want to go back to your role. Like you help your portfolio of companies in terms of their marketing, and also you kind of, I guess, oversee lots of companies that are coming into pitch to you. What does your role actually involve? Because from the sounds of it, you've got one hat on, which is to actually market Seedcamp itself. Mm-hmm. There's another where because you're a marketer, Seedcamp portfolio companies come to you for advice. And I guess another one is, you kind of get involved with early stage startups. Or could you tell us a bit more about what you do?
Yeah, so I guess all of that is true and relevant, plus quite a lot more. So, my role at Seedcamp has definitely evolved, and I should, perhaps it's interesting to talk about how I got to Seedcamp, which was I was CMO at a Seedcamp-backed company that did not work out, as many of them do not. And it was an amazing experience. It was actually my first sort of directly working in a tech company. And I loved it. And Seedcamp was an investor. And, when that business shut down, they said, cool, we lost our money on this company, but actually, look, perhaps you could hop over and, do some stuff with us. And there was quite a specific brand problem that Seedcamp needed solving at that time. Seedcamp had started life as an accelerator. And like every brand that sort of grows and evolves, your initial positioning doesn't necessarily serve you as you go later down the line. And then the curse of having built a real traction and having legacy is that it's quite hard to get others to keep up with you and go on that journey with you. So even though Seedcamp, in 2016, when I joined, they'd been, operating as a seed fund, or at least sort of making moves to operate as such since about 2013, but everyone was still calling it an accelerator. So a big piece of my early work was actually how do we reposition Seedcamp, and lots of customer research and insight into the value, what people thought about us, and essentially the operational behaviors of the organization and how we reframed it to really move our own narrative and story on. And, so that was a lot of the early work, as well as, being able to help the portfolio companies, because I'd done multiple early stage sort of marketing roles. So I'd been there and seen that and got the many scars that go with it. And then over time, it's just evolved, quite significantly. So I actually now, as well as, running everything that touches the Seedcamp brand and the strategic thinking alongside the partners about where we are, why, what we're doing and why that's relevant, plus the portfolio marketing support. I also run the entire infrastructure for portfolio support more broadly. So how we're thinking about getting our companies on that journey to Series A and beyond, and how we're supporting them holistically through infrastructure, tech, products, tools, network, people, operational expertise. There's a lot that goes on. And then obviously, being in this world, meet a lot of founders, see a lot of pitches, and sort of, I get involved a little bit on that, but not so much. I care a lot more, I guess, about being able to double down and focus on really supporting our companies once we have invested. So, yeah.
In terms of, looking through your background on LinkedIn, you started life within the world of PR and traditional communications, I guess, which, what I want to ask you is there is, anyone who goes to university in the UK, at least from my own experience, most people don't actually ever end up doing the profession or the subject or the topic that they studied at university. How did you actually get into the world of, and how did you figure out that was something that you really wanted to spend your career in, or did you was it just something you fell upon, or?
Oh, the truth of this story is, back then, and, I was very fortunate that I got into Oxford, but I came from a state comprehensive school. So I had no idea about venture capital, about banking, about all of these, grad schemes that people were applying for. And it just wasn't my interest area. What I knew I loved and what I did, because I spent a year abroad and I got myself work and I worked as a journalist, I worked in production. I've always known I love stories, that I'm very good with words and people. And I always thought the media world in general would be where I landed up. And then, final year is pretty all consuming. I definitely wasn't interested in going down the, just do a grad scheme, absolutely nothing sort of finance related. And I finished my exams and put a message on LinkedIn and said, yo, finished finals, who's hiring, or what should I do next? And, a guy I'd grown up with who went to a school up the road from me said, oh, my sister's hiring for someone in a comms agency. Do you want to have a chat? And went and interviewed, did a test, and sort of got in there. So was it my dream to work in PR? Absolutely not. Is it something I've sort of, it's so funny, isn't it? PR feels like this quite dirty thing, which I hate, because there are really smart people who work in PR, and there is a real art to be able to tell a fantastic story. But for me, just the medium of PR, or at least how people thought about it, and just with journalists, wasn't interesting to me. I hated the power struggle and how bloody painful journalists can be when they want you as soon as you have something interesting to give them, and then they treat you like shit a lot of the time when you don't. And I was just I'm not about that. And then, when you work in an agency, you have no say over the clients you're going to be working on. And so I was dancing around different agencies, and I went from, very small boutique, which was amazing in terms of, my own learning experience and just being incredibly hands-on right from the off. And, that was a very good insight for me, that I do very well in smaller organizations, probably classic, big fish, small pond mentality, but because I like to feel ownership. And I went from there into somewhere really big, and I hated it. And I remember the chairwoman at the time saying, you're making a massive mistake because you're a racehorse and you're joining a load of plow horses. And I was like, this is the first time you've bothered to speak to me for a year, so I'm going to discount anything you say. Turns out she was right. And I did leave after 4 months, and, then went to another agency after that. And, I think I did enough agencies to realize, okay, this is amazing experience. And I see it now, startups really value having agency people, because you know how to manage so many different things at one time. You're used to working really hard, probably also used to getting Dickel credit for anything that you do. So it was a really great induction of fire, cutting my teeth back there.
But like almost everyone I went to university with is doing something. I studied geography, human geography, so you kind of get more kind of socialist, or I don't think you can say that kind of stuff. Or you cannot get more kind of human-centric than that. And from that to running and working with tech companies in different kind of hats, I've myself kind of seen the whole spectrum of work and the kind of companies and organizations that you could work for. And the journey, like when you said, I went to a state school, I went to a fairly decent university, and the education that I learned was, is what you kind of teach yourself and you kind of learn as you go. And, there I was thinking, like I was working for these companies myself, and I was thinking, what am I doing with myself? Why did I put myself through 4 years of university, three years of university and a master's to work with someone who's like, doesn't really care about these things? And it kind of really had a lot of soul searching in a way. And then I actually ended up working for the Seedcamp company, and then that's when I never looked back and life changed forever. It was, it kind of made me think, why am I in this? There are easier ways to earn money, or, life is a bit more meaningful than just being able to have a cool job and that kind of thing. Going away from that, and that's a whole kind of, like a rabbit hole that we can go down in. We actually, so you were running a clubhouse, which about marketing, and you were speaking to various founders from tech and non-tech businesses who, encountered more or less the same kind of issues. And you kind of mentioned, lead with the story, or kind of you have an advocacy for kind of people buying into who you are as a person. Could you tell us a bit more about how you came upon that realization, and what kind of things that you've seen that has really impressed you? What was that kind of penny drop moment for you?
I guess it's from my own personal experience, perhaps, and I buy into stories. I hate business books that are pure theory, but I love things that give you a journey and a story. So I'll recommend Shoe Dog in a heartbeat, because even though it's a business book, like the narrative and the way that it's communicated to you is so well constructed and thought through, you can't help but feel emotionally drawn in. And that's where I think there's real power. And, fundamentally, and especially with tech companies, and I do see a shift, which I think is excellent. And, people, and kind of to your point around, why am I just working for someone else? Or there's so many other things I can do. People are looking for purpose in their existence. And this idea that work and life are just, diametrically opposed or separated, or you sort of, check in, check out of one and start the other has disappeared. So people are looking for things and opportunities that they can really connect with. And so how do you do that? Well, it's through emotion and getting people excited about what you're taking them on or what they're going to engage with. And that's, whether you're a consumer purchasing a product, to a founder trying to hire amazing talent, to a founder trying to raise investment. I really think that storytelling element is so fundamental across every single touch point. And people buy stories fundamentally, and they remember them and they tell them to other people. We all have heard the stories about Airbnb in the early days and how, they were couch surfing on people's sofas and what that meant. And, these are things we latch onto. And that's why I think it's powerful, because then the natural advocacy builds in and people tell others.
Actually, I have a follow-up question to that.
Go on.
I've met a lot of co-founders, CTOs, CEOs, and COOs of many tech companies. How do you actually explain to them the importance of story? These are guys who've grown up with a computer in front of them. Not everyone, of course, most of them, they interact best with a computer screen, with lines of codes, because these are the guys that you probably talk to on a daily basis. How do you explain to them the importance of story? And do you have a challenge with that?
Do you know what? It's really changing, which is really refreshing. And I've been at Seedcamp now, coming up for 5 years, so long enough to have really seen that. And, founders don't know what they don't know. And this whole seemingly nebulous area of brand is hard, or it feels hard, because are perhaps more comfortable or more experienced in, other functions like product and tech. But the reality is, where I always start is just asking people really simple questions that they probably know the answer to, but they just haven't really delved into, or they haven't thought about how they communicate that story to other people. And, somebody like me, I think it's actually quite helpful having somebody else who can zoom above and extract that sort of information from people and then kind of help codify it and turn it into something that then becomes more of a brand narrative, a founding or like origin story, and then shapes, what you go on to communicate. But, again, even if you think about companies like Hopin, the founder is a very technical founder, but he's hiring amazing people to supplement him in the areas that he is not as experienced in. He's 26, so of course he's not going to be experienced in every element of the business, but he is making key hires and bringing in people who know better than he does in other areas. And that's fundamentally what any great founder will or, would or should be doing.
Because I think this is one of the questions that came up when you ran the Clubhouse session, where like people kind of love being in the comfort and sticking to what they know. So, there's a statistic going around where 40% of all investment money VC money goes directly back into Facebook and Google. Kind of shows, importance of story, importance of brand marketing, but these guys kind of have a default setting to, okay, let's put money behind it. Let's get actual numbers, even though it may be very kind of very short term. How do you yourself actually make sure that you don't get sucked into that numbers world versus you kind of push back to?
Look, with any company, I would sort of like advocate the need of the 80-20 rule. And, that's, something that's like tailored all the time when it comes to business, and 80% has to funnel in towards things that, work. And I don't think it's that every person is an expert in how to use Facebook. They just know that the reach that they're going to get and the potential by going via that platform and channel and what it opens up to versus others gives them the absolute monopoly. And they have to educate themselves, because it's not like those are static businesses. They're also always changing. And then you leave 20% for experimentation and things that don't scale and things that enable you to explore that creativity, because, that's fundamentally part of the real fun and the beauty, especially in the early stage. You have more of that scope to experiment because it's not yet proven what does and does not work. And we can make assumptions that things like Facebook or LinkedIn do, but, not necessarily. And there really are only a handful of big platforms at the end of the day. And then you see new ones come in, and kind of if you're an early adopter, say to Substack, or, some people already like the kind of, clout of something like Clubhouse is waning pretty fast. But if you were early on Clubhouse, people have been able to, deliver pretty strong connections and build interesting relationships and things from that. So, there are other platforms that come in, but you do always need a critical mass in order, I think, to actually make something of it from a business perspective.
This goes to the other extreme, I guess, could you tell us what you did with the bow ties and fivers? And, I think we had a conversation about this off air, where that kind of thing is unscalable and it's, limited to that time and place, but would love to know. Well, I actually got intrigued to, it got me intrigued enough to actually drop you a line and say, hey, we should talk about this. But could you tell us the whole bow tie experience?
Yeah, of course.
What that was about?
I mean, look, I love doing fun things that don't scale, and definitely have done quite a lot of them in the past. The one in particular that you're alluding to was, we could see at Pronto, which was a food tech business that, at the time all the money was going on like Google AdWords and, platforms where it was really hard for us to compete because we weren't as well funded as the likes of Deliveroo. So we were getting killed on things like PPC. So it was like, screw it, what do we do? And the Pronto logo, was a bow tie, and, delivery drivers turned up and delivered your food in a bow tie. And we just created like loads of envelopes with a bow tie on and put them around our delivery zone in London with a fiver in them and said, we'd rather give this money to you than to Google. And it was fun. We thought it was, we were pretty bold, and that was one of the kind of core like brand like DNA parts of Pronto. So we weren't scared to do things that pushed the boundaries a little bit and that didn't scale or that caused a reaction. You know, the first big out of home ad campaign I did for Pronto at the time as well, because we were so early, we didn't have full insight into who our customer was. So the campaign and the message, you know, the brand vision and the purpose and what we were trying to achieve was this global food infrastructure where we could, you know, provide affordable quality food at the touch of a button. The reality was we were barely in zone 1. And so we created this consumer-facing campaign, and it was Feeding London. And that became the Pronto message. And then as part of that, creatively, it was like, cool, who are the people that we're feeding in London? And we sort of brought that to life. And, you know, it was quite strategic in the people I used. It was all sort of friends and family, but people who were well connected in their relevant fields. And, you know, one of the women we used, because, you know, our food was delivery food that changed. Delivery food does not look attractive, and it's a rotating menu. So I couldn't do a picture of a meal and guarantee that's what you're going to get in a month's time. So, you know, it had to be, again, back to the storytelling angle, right? It had to tell a story. It had to feel more emotional. You know, one of the images, maybe I'll dig it out and share it with you, but, you know, it was a woman eating a burger and she had like burger sauce falling like down her face. And like, we got Twitter outrage. We had people like, it's disgusting. Like, what does this look like? And then, well, actually, one of my really funny memories at Seedcamp was because another one of the images was a friend who's sort of, you know, very well established in the fitness world, and our protein balls. And this is why, like, there's actually always data behind things that I would do. But if you ordered our protein balls, you had a much higher repeat purchase rate. So we could see that people loved it, and it was a great driver to bring people back to the platform. So actually pushing the protein balls was a core part of our marketing activity. And so did this campaign and had Tara pose with a protein ball in her mouth. And then when I joined Seedcamp, like a few months later, I could see, and we did it, this is the other bit. So we did it around Wimbledon, and we did a Facebook retargeting campaign for lapsed users who hadn't ordered in a while, thinking that this would be a great way to get them back onto the platform. And then if they ordered, they would stay with us because they'll have had these protein balls. And, you know, it was like #balls please was the campaign. And I joined Seedcamp a few months later, and I could see, like, in an old chat, someone had said, God, there's clearly no women in this Pronto team because no one would have put this out. And I was like, guilty.
Oh my God. Well, the thing is, like, this is quite interesting because, you know, you've got a wide spectrum of range of experiences. You know, you've done probably a whole range of kind of marketing activities, including just literally putting money on Facebook, Google, as well as doing like the Bowtie campaign and a few others, which we spoke about earlier. How do you kind of stop yourself from actually someone who comes to you and says, hey, Natasha, we want to do this? And you could literally spoon feed them an idea and say, hey, there are 15 things you can do, but try these 3 things first. You could do that. But, you know, like clearly what you've faced is, you know, you've tried out lots of different things and actually worked out what the best, you know, that journey of trying things out is actually probably more valuable sometimes to kind of re-engage that message or kind of really resonate with the founder and also the customer. How do you stop yourself from doing that sometimes? Or does that kind of thing happen?
As in try and tell people what they should and should not do?
Yeah, rather than, you know, kind of encouraging them to experiment with things.
Yeah. I think I see myself and my role as more of it's more of a coaching sort of role, right? And I'm not there to tell somebody what they should or should not do, and neither do I want to. I can give my learned experience, or I can connect people with others who know much better than I do, and that's what I focus on doing. But look, fundamentally, like half the time people just ignore what I have to say, and people will do what they want to do, and as they should, because I think a lot of the time, look, you learn best by making your own mistakes and then figuring it out from there. So I would never want to stop anyone from doing that. And, you know, plenty of our companies have done things that we were like, really, do you want to do this? And they went ahead with it, and we were like, cool. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, it's come back and they were like, yeah, didn't really achieve anything, but we tried, and at least we tried.
Sorry, someone's at my door.
All right.
Me and my brother, we live together, so hopefully he'll get it. Maybe it's a man in a bow tie.
Well, that was the other problem, because it was raining half the pissing time. All the drivers had their coats all the way up, so you couldn't even see the bow tie.
Oh, did you actually make them wear the bow tie?
Yeah, they did. It was a good actually example as well of like, so when I came into Pronto, that already existed in terms of like the brand identity and positioning, but it wasn't working in terms of, so when I came in, and traditionally what's happened when I've joined brands is I've had to reposition them and create something that extends beyond just having a product and turns it into more of a brand. And Pronto was a good example because it felt like a luxury treat, and it was a bow tie. But the reality was it was a meal that was between £7 to £9, no delivery fee, and delivered to you within 25 minutes. And for us to be successful as an organization, as a business, it relied on high repeat frequency. And if you position something that feels like a real treat, you don't get that. So actually, like, one of the real things I did when I joined Pronto was try and make it more accessible so that we could drive frequency. And, that worked. And it was even simple things like deconstructing the design of the bow tie and like creating different shapes and adding color. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, actually, who was asking me for good examples of, rebrands or reframings. And, we had essentially billboards driving around London, and the brand was black and white. And it was a missed opportunity to capture people's attention. And so there's all of these sort of things, I think, that, often founders think of and they think looks really cool. And then when you start to pick apart like how hard it's working for you or what you really need it to do, you start to find holes and then start to address those things. So you create a responsive brand.
This is the journey which led you to become the master marketer that you are, in terms of
something like that. I feel a bit like a phony though, because I'm not really a traditional marketer anymore. It's been close to 5 years since I've been in a company where I've got a separate marketing P&L that is reliant on my activity to drive conversion or spend, because that's obviously not how the nature of Seedcamp works.
No, but the argument, I'm being your coach now. You could say, a football manager has not kicked a ball professionally for 20 years, but, you need someone who's got that experience to be able to kind of see the holes and also the gaps in your game to be able to kind of truly advise you. Well, the reality is, you look at any marketing literature, actually the good ones, there are universal truths that will stay forever. Shoe Dog, for example, the story element. We're actually reading this with our book club at the moment. See, I do read. I make it look like I read. But
why are you making that judgment? I never said it looks like you don't read.
No, to the audience.
Okay.
To the trolls.
Buds reads, everyone. He's told us it. Exclusive.
To the trolls, the haters, the assholes, the Kanye West kind of thing.
Dang, what have you done to attract haters?
Actually, this is... So I used to work for this corporate company, and I was talking to their CFO once, and then I was just talking to him about books, and I was like, he literally looks at me stunned. He's like, "Oh my God, you actually read books?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I started talking to him about a book we'd read. It was like The Alchemist or something like that. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say anything about the book or the author or anything like that at the moment. That's just another kind of topic in itself. But, I was like, yeah, I've read The Alchemist. And I said it connected in ways that I had no idea that I even had, and the emotional depths. And also I was able to kind of really understand life lessons. And he looked at me stunned. And the very next day, he had a completely different perception of me. And that I've actually never told that story to anyone before. So that was really interesting. Back to what we were saying. Marketing books, but the best lessons, I guess, are self-taught. The journey that you went through and the journey we went through as a company, and the company I'm involved in now, has been lots of trial and errors. You tend to default to the things that you know best, but then once you open your mind to different things, then you kind of learn things, and you kind of drop the things that don't work or what worked before. Like you were saying earlier, founding teams sometimes need to kind of, once they've outstayed their journey within the company, kind of need to progress to do something else, just because you cannot be good at scaling, coming up with an idea and actually maintaining forever,
look, that's a whole, every founder needs to build a stellar team around them eventually. And, whether the founder stays within the business or not is a whole different kind of area. But look, personally for me, when I first joined Savsay, which was my first kind of marketing role, I'd never done marketing in my life. And all of a sudden, I'm joining a company and I have a 6-figure budget and I have to put a marketing strategy in place and I'm doing everything. And I remember, thinking, God, can I do this? But I guess my mentality was just like, I'm going to work so bloody hard. And the journey and the ride, even though it was crazy and the founder was a psychopath, was so incredible for my own learning experience, for both the good and the bad. And that to me was invaluable. And, again, just further kind of proof, that in my own hiring now, I look for raw talent and intuition and invest a lot in coaching people, because I guess never in an organization have I had that done for myself, and I believe very much in doing it for others. But also then when it comes to startups hiring, it becomes very tricky, because a founder doesn't necessarily have the time and the energy to coach somebody. But then equally, I think when you over-index in the early stage on experience, you often get people who aren't executors or don't want to get their hands dirty and don't want it enough. So there's real fine balance in terms of, finding people who can really grow with an organization. And I think what's amazing when you look at companies like, Wise, now TransferWise, or Revolut or Monzo, so many of the early people in those companies were right at the kind of earlier stages of their career. And they're all now going on to do exceptional things. And they're the kind of next wave of entrepreneurs that we're seeing. And, the danger, or what I don't want, is that, everyone just starts hiring the kind of more experienced person rather than making the bets on the newer people who have the potential but maybe just aren't getting given the shot. But to be honest, all the new people coming out are just so in control of their own brands and creating and doing amazing stuff off their own steam. It's pretty phenomenal to see.
Do you think we will, this is a slightly kind of disjointed point, do you think we will see more CMOs who are almost CEOs than CTOs who are kind of leading companies, or visionaries, rather than tech guys who, this is just a thought I had. Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, look, the CMO role has often been quite a cursed role in the more traditional sense. But I think if you have ex-CMOs starting to build businesses, and they're generally, probably lots of skills that are, akin to being the CEO in terms of understanding how to, get the best out of people, manage different stakeholders, culture, all of those sort of things. Often you see more the COO or the CFO becoming the CEO as opposed to the CTO or the CMO. Also, I personally don't really believe in job titles. I barely have a proper one myself. I do think people just flex it to be whatever they want. Now you see a chief creative officer or chief customer officer, and there is a C for absolutely everything. So yeah, how meaningful that always is now somewhat debatable.
Wow. In terms of your journey, you've been with Seedcamp for a few years, and I guess you've seen companies from very, very early, kind of, the Hopin person spending time with you, literally probably same desk as you guys in and actually blowing up in terms of, where they are at the moment. They're one of the hottest startups in Europe, if not the world.
The world.
The world, baby. And when they give me a discount code, it will be the universe, and we'll be so happy with them.
I can't guarantee any discounts. Actually, do you know what? That's a good example where actually discounting discounts your brand. And for those who don't need to do that, that's very powerful. Pricing wars is not necessarily, it's some zero sort of game to get in. And we've seen the bottom fall out with commodity products like mattresses, where the idea that there was any real brand loyalty is bullshit, and people just want a free trial and the cheapest option. So I actually think it speaks to the strength of a brand and a product experience when you don't need to lean so heavily into discounting, because it's a dangerous game.
Well, I'm only asking because, out of love rather than for brand disloyalty. Because, to be honest, this is we tested so many different platforms, and we settled on Hopin or StreamYard just because it had so many things that it matched for us, like an advert. Hey, give us a job, Hopin people. Literally, so we recommended this to so many of our clients. You can do things like this. You can connect with someone on the phone. You can have your branding, and you can record on a professional kind of semi-professional kit and all that kind of stuff. So it's really good. The fact that we actually have been with Hopin or StreamYard for the last 6 months now, and it's never let us down. Never let us down.
Especially the new tagline, never let us down.
We won't let you down. Natasha, like, how do you, like, sometimes, you have the curse of knowledge where you know so much, or you've experienced so many things, you don't know where to start, or you become paralyzed in terms of making decisions or giving advice or seeing things objectively. How does that happen to you, and how do you overcome it?
Good question. I think there is both a beauty and a danger in over relying on pattern recognition. And it's something, especially in the investment world, that we do a lot, right? We look at trends and patterns, and we saw this here, so this must mean the same here. And that's dangerous, because if you just rely on that, then you're not truly being open to new experiences and kind of to what we were talking about earlier, that the world moves on. I think, that the idea of paralysis is really key across so many things. In fact, like back to Pronto, the food business I was at, like we never had more than 7 options of meals to order on that menu, because we knew option paralysis was such a real thing. And people looked at overwhelming menus and they're like, what do I do about this? And, it's the same thing as well. And actually, I think a real danger for a lot of startup founders, because it's amazing to connect with great people and get their advice and get their insights. But everybody has a different opinion as well. And so if you have like 5 people trying to pull you in different directions, which way do you actually go? So I guess, look, for me personally, anytime I'm speaking to somebody, I caveat it heavily with like, this is my experience, or this is what I've seen. You need to do what you trust best. And then within things that I'm engaging with or seeing personally, I guess it's how much do I believe in the person behind it, or the kind of their potential to really make something big and compelling, and then how do you sort of best equip them and set them up for success?
Wow, that's true. Sometimes I try to kind of censor myself when I'm speaking to my team, because I can say, hey, do it this way, but they'll never gain anything from it. Whereas if they make a mistake, actually, it goes to Luke from Pleo. We had actually booked him in for a podcast for a fintech focused one, Fintech Mix, plug here. He was supposed to be our first guest, right? And the journalist that we'd hired to actually record him, and we were like, Pleo, first guest, really excited. The new guy who'd started, the procedure we have is always to ring up and make a call sheet and make the presenter know and everyone else know what's going on. So Luke is a professional, shout out to you, Luke, if you're listening. He was on time, again with StreamYard, and he was like, hey, I'm on StreamYard. Why is anyone in? The critical mistake my colleague had made was he never rang the journalist to say, hey, you've got a thing at 10:30 tomorrow morning. And the journalist, God bless them, he overslept. And Luke is like, I rang him up he's in Denmark. And I was like, Luke, I'm really sorry. we made a fuck up. And whereas I held my tongue, I said, look, you will learn from this more than I will ever be able to teach you with anything. So that was my kind of takeaway from this.
And back to like authenticity and storytelling, like respect that the person just was honest about saying they overslept. Like, I remember so clearly one of our team, Kieran, he's an absolute legend, but we had a team meeting one morning and Kieran rocked up late and he was just like, I'm so sorry guys, I overslept. And we were like, we kind of laughed. We were like, yeah, can't really, complain about that. Whereas I was actually telling my team about another story this morning about an intern that we had who was, she was awesome, but she was trying to get a new job. And she told me that she was ill and she couldn't come into the office. And, we always support our interns like in finding the next roles. We really want to help them do that. She told me she was ill and she couldn't come into the office, and then had actually gone to Sweden to doorstep this company that she wanted a job with, and was posting about it on Instagram. I was like, woman, like, I want you to get this job. I will totally support you. It's like, don't lie to me about where you are. So yeah, being honest and telling like your real story, there's no danger in that. People will often respect that more.
Yeah, because we had a similar incident where the first meeting that we had, I
was 10 minutes late.
I'm joking. Look,
I was 10 minutes late. And you know what? So one of the things, you talked about how do I fit lots of things in. So one of the things I've actually done, so I am militant with my diary, but I've had to turn off notifications because it's unbearable otherwise. And I just got into a flow of like actually getting some work done. And then I was like, oh, holy shit. Like the problem with not having the notifications on, and I've actually just got into like a deep flow state of doing things, is I've now missed a call. But, I'm eternally apologetic for that. And I've been on time today.
You actually were earlier than me, so that was...
Exactly. So I win. Redemption.
Before we go into the reason why most people are probably listening in, your song pattern, I want to talk to you about something quite serious, actually.
Okay.
You open TechCrunch, you open any tech news worthy of, reading or your attention. You see a company being funded, and you can close your eyes and say, hey, what do these people look like? And it's usually 3 men and 3 kind of white guys often, or someone who's an Oriental person. But you seldom see people who are women or who are Black or who are kind of from a, Seedcamp. Sorry, I don't want you to put your Seedcamp hat on. I want you to just talk to me as someone who's in the tech world or someone who's an observer. Is this changing? And are lots of, I know that you have your own initiatives and lots of other companies or seed fund companies have their own kind of open hours or open access. Is this, without wanting to say any names or, what you've seen, are these people just doing this as a token gesture, or is this something that they are serious about? Not you, obviously, but I want to just talk to me from your own experience.
Look, the cynic in me says that people often look at things as an opportunity to promote themselves, but actually the optimist in me says if it's something that actually drives change and gives a platform to people, then it's something to be encouraged. And, fundamentally, if we all bury our heads in the sand and pretend that there isn't a problem, then nothing changes. And so I think it's important that, companies, and organizations like own up to their shit, but it means nothing if they don't then do something about that.
Wow. Because I'm in a room with a lot of these people, founders or tech founders or even just general businesses, and they tend to be very black and white, quite literally sometimes, and although I see myself as a founder or a business person, there is this kind of other side, which is kind of polarizing how behavior or, this kind of thing where, you're not a founder, you're a person of color or that kind of thing. And I wonder sometimes, obviously this isn't the view of the podcast, but I wonder if this kind of thing kind of more divides us than not. But also I take into account, having been in these kind of rooms, there are some people who I know for a fact are genuinely trying to make a difference. But at the same time, there are people, there's a lady I knew, she created a company and it was doing okay, but then she created the same company, but is aimed just at female founders. And I was thinking, are you really addressing this just by kind of even dividing, the product that you're selling is equally available to both men and women? Are you just like jumping on the bandwagon? Is your heart really into it rather than that kind of thing? So it's just things I've seen, personally.
I mean, I remember actually, like listening to somebody from Instagram's creative shop saying that, they were doing a competition, I think, for photographic entries, and they wanted it to be blind. And then in terms of the applicants, and then by being blind, like there was a higher volume of men promoting themselves. So it was more men winning. And so they had to like put a layer of positive discrimination in to actually be able to drive some change. So it's such a difficult balance because, you know, and I've actually written something about this in the past, like, you know, about not wanting to ever be seen as the token. You know, I felt like the token state school kid at Oxford, and I got called as such. And then I never want to be like a token woman in a room. And, you know, I think there's a real pushback by lots of people from more diverse backgrounds. It's not that I'm a Black founder, I'm a founder. It's not that I'm a female VC, I am a VC. But, you know, it's fundamentally headlines and publications that drive this narrative and sort of frame people as such, rather than us framing ourselves within those like lazy categories.
It's true, and it's like kind of sensationalist journalism, or, you know, like anything that can get you a quick reaction, people tend to kind of default to. And, you know, like you were saying, I have switched off all my notifications, especially on social media, just because I tend to get sucked into it, and then, you know, you kind of buy people's opinions and hold it as fact rather than, you know, as you know, hold it accountable. Which, you know, you got to have a balance between the two. But going back to Oxford, I mean, you must have held your own with those toffs up in Oxford.
You know what? I got two of my nicknames were Eliza Doolittle from My Fair Lady and Nancy from Oliver Twist. And, you know, it was like, what? Really? Like, I'm pretty well spoken and articulate. And it was interesting because I'd got called posh bitch at school, and then I was getting called Nancy at university. So, you know, at least I feel I'd had the like full spectrum along the way.
Discriminated wherever you go. Like that.
So as you say, I did a pretty good job of holding my own.
I mean, you know, I think you kind of have that kind of twinkle in the eye, and anyone who has gone through changes or, you know, done anything meaningful in life, you got to have that kind of spark, I guess. How do you okay, so I think we've kind of unthreaded a lot of topics that kind of deserve a more of an in-depth discussion. But I want to kind of wrap things up. In terms of your, so there is your marketing hat on, there is your academic hat on, I guess, and there is your kind of passion. How did you, and I think I read the Medium article that you posted about your song and how it all came about. What made you want to actually, you know, go into a studio or, you know, actually hit record and actually publish it? And how long did it take you to actually make that decision to say, you know what, I'm just going to put this out there?
So actually, I really didn't want to. And I am very good at marketing other people, but classic, like, and I think this is, and sorry to generalize, like a more female, like, trait in general. I get the ick of doing it for myself. So it's so much easier to like hide behind brands and work for other people. And it takes a huge amount of vulnerability to do it for yourself. So, you know, the reality is, like, I'd written those lyrics, or that was something I'd been thinking about. And, you know, I like words, so I write, or I like talking, and I can come up with like relatively, I hope, compelling things to say. But it's a real change when it's something that's actually personal to you, and something that I traditionally shy away from. And I often think, well, why would anyone care about what I have to say? And, you know, my partner was definitely the catalyst in terms that he's an entrepreneur. So he was like, and this was right at the beginning of lockdown last year. And he was like, why don't we, it's a Sunday, we've got nowhere to go. He plays piano, and he was like, why don't we try making some music? And he was playing around with some chords, and I came out with that. And we then, you know, started recording it. And, you know, he has a music tech company, so he has some sort of, you know, equipment at home. Like, it took us a year because it was, you know, neither of us really knew what we were doing. And, you know, when we first recorded it, we didn't have proper headphones. So I was having to like listen to the track playing really quietly and sing on top. But then obviously all the like stuff had been picked up, and then we changed the track. So like we had to up our equipment game. And like, obviously when the world opened up, we sort of, you know, wanted to do fun things. But I've actually found it a really interesting marketing experiment, and all the classic kind of, you know, so my tendency actually, for somebody who's normally like really strict around like brand identity, how you get things out, compelling, etc., I was like, let's just ship. Whereas my partner, who's an entrepreneur, was like, but no, like, wait a second, think about it. I'm like, no, come on, because then we want to like get on to the next thing and the next track, and the longer we take on this one, the, you know, more we take away from doing the other. But it was also a real, like, feels like something quite entrepreneurial, having to do absolutely everything ourselves. And it's hard on top of a full-time job, right? Like coming up with the creative ideas and making it, actually physically recording it and doing it, and then putting everything behind it to market it, to the like 10 people perhaps listen to it.
I listen to it.
Yay! Yeah, my mom.
And you and I followed you on Spotify in the hope that you will release more stuff.
So that's the thing, and it's hard though. Like it's hard to like galvanize yourself to like constantly be bearing your soul, and a balance between, well, do you just put out shit that you don't care about, and what's the point of that? Like saying things or singing things that are meaningless, but then also like digging in to constantly be like, revealing yourself is not easy.
I actually think there's a direct correlation, that emotion or that journey is the first day you kind of release your website, or, that there are a few friends of mine who are they have this kind of anxiety. Okay, I'm going to update my LinkedIn to say I've left my safe corporate job and I've set up my own company. And I was listening to Howard Stern interviewing Lady Gaga, and this was 4 or 5 years ago. And I don't know if you would agree, but, what she said was every time she releases a new song, it's like showing a picture of your vagina to the world. And I was like, because one, it was a shocking kind of thing, and it's so true, kind of really opening yourself and actually showing the world your creation, I guess. Is that how it felt?
Yeah, I mean, maybe not my vagina, maybe more my heart. But like the thing that was then really rewarding as part of that was like customer feedback. So people getting in touch and saying they loved it, or the words resonated with them, or, a friend texted me saying, this guy is playing your song at the end of his workouts. And, somebody, a master trainer at Barry's was playing my song at the end of, as a cool down track at the end of his workouts without having, told me, and like things like that are just quite cool. And people who want to support you is obviously lovely. But pressure to go and finish the next one. Maybe another year till the next track.
I'm sure the listeners will be supporting you. Like what you hear? Then check out some of the other episodes in this series, or visit us at zerocaloriemarketing.com.